Hi. So this is a very different video than most of the other things on this channel. This series, I guess, I don't know. This is going to be a thing I do on Sundays for blog posts. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I am going to be teaching internationally. As of right now, for at least another week, I am an online teacher living in the US. I turned in my 2 weeks notice a week ago, and I'm going to be flying out from Mongolia on August 4th. So I'm very excited. I'm going to be teaching calculus, statistics, and pre-calculus. So I am a math and physics certified teacher, although I have actually taught so many things throughout my career. Math, obviously, science of various kinds, music, surprisingly, English as well. So many different classes and things that I've had to teach at different levels for different reasons. I already said for different reasons. Anyways, these blog posts are going to be much more rambly. I'm not going to edit things out. They're just going to be what they are. Part of the reason I'm doing these is because the purpose of this channel, even though right now this first series that I'm doing is calculus, the purpose of this channel initially is to support my own classes and whatever school that I'm going to be at so the school now and maybe my permanent school, I don't know. I am on a 2-year contract, and that could turn out to be a forever contract. You know, we'll see what life does. But my purpose is to support my classes and to support students. And you know, the channel is called Olivia Teaches Everything because, as I just alluded to a moment ago, I've had to teach a lot of different topics, and I've had to learn a lot of different things in order to teach those things. And while I am not necessarily licensed in all realms, I went to high school and I've studied all these things. I've had to help my own children. I am a mother of 2, and I've had to help my own children with various, subjects throughout school. And in teaching ALE, I've had to help students with credit recovery throughout various classes, teaching that material. I've tutored students through various classes and materials that are well outside of just my general licensure. And so my goal here is to create a channel that will eventually have the material for all of the core classes that students need for middle school and high school. It's probably not going to cover elementary, but that's mostly because when it comes to child development, the only thing that I really consider myself an expert on for child development are my own 2 kids. Anything beyond that, and I'm like, you know what, hey, my 2 were hard enough, and are hard enough. And I really see a lot of elementary school, 5th grade and below is a lot of content, but a lot of child development. Whenever I tend to work with students at that age, I usually find that I tend to play a lot of games and have a lot of fun. And content-wise, it's a lot harder to deliver that content. So I'm very impressed by people that can do that, because that's a little outside of my area of expertise. Once you get to 6th grade and above, I tend to be able to be able to do that level. So that's kind of where I go. But anyways, these blog posts aren't always going to be just about education theory and stuff like that. They are going to be about, online teaching, and they're going to be about living in Mongolia and doing what I'm doing. Because one of the things that I have found interesting is that when I accepted the position in Mongolia, I started doing research, because when I started looking to teach internationally, I actually started looking for Latin America and South America. Por ejemplo, inicia aprendiendo español en noviembre. But obviously, that was not necessarily the language that I needed to start learning. I'm still studying Spanish because I love languages, and I find all languages to be useful. As soon as I accepted the position in Mongolia, I tried to start looking for material to start learning Mongolian, and it turns out it's a lot more difficult. I was aware a bit of Mongolian culture and of Mongolia mostly through my love of sumo and The Who. It's a band, in case you're not aware. By the way, if you have not seen the trailer for the new Predator movie coming out, Alien, I believe it's the new Alien vs. Predator, might just be Predator, I can't remember what the title of it is, but I was very excited because the very first thing that happened was I heard The Who, and I was just like, oh, I recognize that voice, so I was extremely excited by that. Um, but anyways, sorry, that's an aside. You'll get a lot of those here. I think I've already said that too. But part of this is that it's only going to be me and my youngest that are traveling over to Mongolia. My spouse and my oldest are going to be staying here for at least to begin with, because, like I said, we're kind of looking for a potentially permanent, place to go, and until we find that permanent place, it's just going to be easier. I'm used to traveling, and so it'll be easier to have, one person traveling until we find that permanent place that we want to settle in for, ever to live. But that's neither here nor there when it comes to this stuff. Uh, what I find interesting, though, is that when it comes to moving to certain places in the world, it's very easy to find information. Like, for example, if you wanted to join the JET program and go to Japan, you'll find tons and tons of content creators and information about cultural things, about life, about what it's like, about what you need to know, what you need to do, all kinds of like language assistance, all just tons of stuff. If you want to go to China, there's lots of information, lots of help for that. If you want to go to South America, there's lots of information, tons and tons and tons of stuff. Most of the European countries that you'd want to travel to, lots of information. But when it comes to traveling to places like Mongolia, traveling to places like Vietnam, traveling to places like Thailand, to live, not to vacation, to actually live and and be there as a person who is going to integrate into the culture and not be, a, a bull in a china shop who everyone else has to kind of like deal with you being there kind of situation. Not to be too blunt about it, but to be the stereotypical rude American walking into another country expecting everybody else to just kind of deal with you being their situation. Because I know that is a stereotype that is around in the world for us. Um, it's difficult to find that stuff. And I have found some information, but as a math and science person, I always like to research multiple things. You never want to get one source, and trying to find multiple sources of information and multiple viewpoints of people living in Ulaanbaatar and figuring out exactly, what are cultural expectations. Something as simple as of the fact that, here in the United States, it's no big deal to show your shoulders, like whatever, tank tops, who cares? I mean, as a teacher, you don't, but that's just because in schools we don't, you don't wear thin straps. But in general, just, it's not a big deal, whatever. But it was one of those things that when I was asking about, hey, what's the shoulders was a very, it was emphasized. And I don't know how important that is, because that was coming from one person who is my point of contact. Um, and maybe that's just a cultural thing, or maybe that's just one thing with one person. I have no idea because I don't have enough touchstones. So through these blog posts, I'm hoping to help other people who might be traveling internationally, teachers, people who are doing these things. We've got our tickets booked. On Monday, I'm taking my dog into the vet to go international. And for example, one of the things I didn't know is that one of the difficulties of taking a pet internationally from the United States is not necessarily traveling into other countries. I mean, other countries do have strong quarantines about traveling into the country, but specifically is leaving the United States with your pet, due to the fact that we do not have as strong of controls and health regulations for pets within the United States. So traveling out of the United States becomes an issue in that you have to get um, uh, specific specific veterinarians who are um, licensed. There we go. Who are licensed that can do international travel, so that you're not taking diseases out of the country, regardless of which country you travel into. So whether that country has regulations or not, you can't take your pet out of the country. And then, of course, if you're going to be going out and then coming back in, you need to make sure that you have, you know, your documentation, because it would be a very sad thing for you to take your pet out of the country and then not be able to bring them back with you because you don't have the proper documentation and you can't get it in the country that you're living in. So, you know, and that's something that maybe if you haven't been able to research it, you wouldn't have thought about. Who knows, you know? Or if you are just starting out your desire to go international, and there's so many other things to think about, and you haven't thought about that. So it's, you know, it's all the little things. Or for example, the visa process. You know, the process for us of going, and it was submitting all the documentation to the school. They submitted the documentation. Then it was getting your license accepted so that you could then, you know, having all of your having all the licensure accepted, and then after that getting the work permit, and then after the work permit, then it's the visa, and that's an extremely long process uh, to go through. And then it was, are you going to be going to a consulate, or is it possible that you can pick up the visa when you land in the country? These are, you know, again, things that conversations you have to have with whoever your point of contact is with the school, that you may not think about when you're accepting your positions. You know, and they're not hard conversations to have, but they're questions you need to ask, because, you know, it's just a thing about where you're traveling from or where you're traveling to, of the person that you're talking to may or may not be aware that if you're traveling to a country from, say, again, use the United States, Canada, you know, a large country, where you're traveling from the middle of that country, and the only consulate is on the far coast, and you're talking about a large amount of travel you're going to have to go from there to then go. And arranging that travel is something that you have to think about, that, you know, it's just things you have to plan for, you know, what you're going to take with you, all those kinds of things. So, like I said, we're leaving in a month, and I'm going to put these blog posts up every Sunday. And as we plan for what we're taking, as we, you know, go through the process, when we get there, and then when we're there, and as I'm creating videos and I'm learning. I mean, if you go watch any of the calculus videos I'm doing, I'm hoping that you see a clear kind of process of style change and growth in my editing. I'm not new to content creation, but there is a vast gulf in the difference in being a small classroom teacher. And when I say small, I don't mean small school. I mean normal classroom, 30 student, right? I've done that. And then I've also done large lecture hall style classes at university level. I've done the large classroom where you're in charge of the whole thing, you know, the 60, 70 students, but you basically get free reign over it. And I've also done the large scale classroom where it's a coordinated class with a coordinated testing center, where you teach the class, but it's coordinated across an entire group of like 60 or 70 other instructors with a single uniform test, and you're having to do departmental meetings, so departmental structured classes. I've done those as well. Each of those has their own pedagogical differences and issues and things that you have to do within your teaching. I've taught online with completely asynchronous learning via the original, like with the Blackboard online learning platforms. Blackboard was a nightmare when it was first released. That was not a fun process. I'm Online learning platforms have come so far, and I thank everything for that because they're much better now than they used to be. Um, and then, of course, live online classes are very different. It's a little closer to being in a classroom, but you have to be much more engaging and entertaining. It's a little closer to being a streamer, honestly, from back when I used to stream. It's very different. And then doing videos is an entirely different situation, an entirely different, which is different from this blog post where this is just more free form talking and whatever. And then even these videos, the videos I'm doing that are the education videos are different than a lot of the content that I consume for either educate, like I say educational, for informational, there we go, informational purposes versus uh, entertainment purposes. Because, and even when it comes to entertainment purposes, there's different, obviously, kinds of entertainment, because there's a vast difference between if I'm watching something for, say, watching a movie versus watching, say, a sporting event or like sumo or something like that versus watching, like, say, a concert event or watching, say, people playing Commander, you know, or if I'm, things like that, right? All of those different kinds of content have different goals and different styles. And this kind of academic content that I'm trying to create is also a very different thing for me than what a lot of the stuff that I'm consuming is. Because in academia, you know, we fall into we have two broad goals, right? As teachers, we have two goals, getting outside of the school thing. And our primary goal is for the learner to learn, right? Like that's our primary goal. We want learners to learn. But our secondary goal is just as important, and that is assessing the learner. And by that, I don't mean giving them tests and letter grades. And I also don't mean assessing them for just the public. Assessing a learner is also about assessing the learner for the learner. It's doing a service both for the learner and for the public at large. And as you get further into the learner's journey and the learner's career, the assessment portion becomes more important because they're getting closer to the point where they're going to go from being the learner to the professional. And this is where we also kind of get into that key difference between the teacher and the professor, because the teacher's job leans way more towards the learning half or the learning portion of, you know, that academia, and the professor's job leans way more towards the assessment portion of that academia, because, you know, at that point the learner is much closer to being the professional, where they're going to have to be responsible for their own actions, and they're going to be, you know, and by that I mean, like, take a lawyer, a doctor, anybody who's going to be a licensed professional, a plumber, an electrician, you know, anybody who's going to be in any kind of position where the job they do is going to have some effect on somebody in the public, and we license them, we regulate them because they could have some effect. A mechanic, you know, a tattoo artist, a stylist, you know, anybody where there's a, a public concern of health or safety or regulation. The assessment portion of academia is there to protect the learner and the public. And that protect the learner portion is because, take the bar exam for a lawyer, for example. That's an expensive test. And if somebody goes to law school and they're learning, and they leave law school and you have told them, oh yeah, you're great, you're gonna do marvelous, you should go ahead and go take the bar exam, you'll pass and be a great lawyer, and they're terrible, they don't know the stuff they need to know, they haven't demonstrated the knowledge required to pass the bar exam, so they won't be a practicing lawyer, but you're telling them go pay all this money to take the exam? Like, you failed them in the assessment portion of the job of the learning, right? So that's kind of the two things. And so this channel isn't about the assessment portion, it's about the learning portion. But in academia, because this is focused on learning for academia, that means that the content is going to be focused on learning, but always with kind of an idea that you are learning and will be assessed, and you're going to want to pass those assessments. So I I would love to and want to just make content just for the purpose of learning, of pure learning. But you know what? There's so much of that content out there that's so good. Go watch SciShow. I mean, it's so good. And there's so much of just amazing people that you can watch. So many that I couldn't even begin to list all of the people that I watch, that I love, for just pure learning new stuff every day, right? Um, and it's great because you never have to worry about watching their stuff and then being tested later. You can go listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about space for hours on end, and then learn 3 amazing facts, and never have to worry that someone is going to hand you a sheet of paper and say, if you cannot repeat 3 facts that you learned 2 weeks ago, you're never going to get this job you want, right? And that's kind of the pressure the teacher has. And so the goal of this channel is to help learners learn, but also help them learn in a way that will help them with that aspect, that unfortunate necessary aspect of academia. So anyways, this has probably gone on long enough, and that's the great thing about me not doing all of this as a job and only doing this to support my actual job, which is being a classroom teacher now, and was being an online classroom teacher. This is, by the way, my office at my home. These are my chalkboards that I got from the university I used to teach at. So that's why it looks the way it looks, with my little Metroid back there and stuff. Is because this is in my house. But but yeah, so I can ramble on these things because I don't care if this ever goes anywhere or ever gets anything, because it's here to support students. I'm never going to turn on ads or monetize any of this, and if I ever put anything out, like a coffee or a Patreon or whatever, it's gonna be so that I can, buy more chalk, because you'd be surprised how much of this stuff you go through. It's expensive, and the saddest thing that ever happened to me locally was when all of the stores, and I mean all of them, stopped carrying colored chalk. So now all I can get is the basic white chalk, and that made me very sad. But we live, we move, and I thought about making my own, but as I'm only going to be here for another month and a half, maybe I'll find colored chalk in Mongolia, or maybe I'll have to switch over to whiteboards, or maybe I'll have to switch over to doing digital like everybody else does and start writing on my computer screen like I do in some of my videos. I don't prefer it as much because, I don't know, I like the feel and the look of the classic just writing on the chalkboard. But I think I said this has already gone on too long, and now I've just rambled on a little bit longer. So anyways, every Sunday you'll see one of these. Watch them if you want. Don't watch them if you don't want. And remember, if you have any questions about anything, being an international teacher, questions for me, questions about being an online teacher, questions about teaching in Alaska, questions about teaching in the south of the United States, not the south of America, South America, the south of the United States, anything. Feel free, drop in the comments, join us on Discord. That's always going to be free. If you have questions about math, if you have questions about science, if you have questions about anything in school that you need help with, that's what I'm here for. That's what this channel is here for. And hopefully it'll be that way for a very long time. I'll see you next week. Bye.